Hey, friend. Tonight we're stepping into a quieter corner of the past. Picture a medieval village where the lanes are narrow, the thatched roofs drip with rain, and smoke curls faintly into the night sky. Most cottages hum with life, a husband's heavy steps, children's laughter, the bubbling of pots over the hearth. But not every door opens to such noise. Some houses stand in silence, with only a single candle flickering in the window. These are the homes of women who lived alone. Widows, spinsters, healers, or simply the unlucky. In a world where belonging meant protection, their solitude was both strength and shadow. To fetch water from the well meant facing whispers. To trade at the market meant every coin was watched twice. A cottage garden could feed you, but it could also mark you as strange. And yet, there's something quietly resilient here. The creak of floorboards in an empty room, the rhythm of wood chopped by a woman's own hands, the courage it takes to sleep through nights when the wind in the thatch sounds too much like footsteps. Some saw them as hard-working, even virtuous. Others, with suspicion darkening their words, called them witches. Tonight, we'll wander through that solitude together. The lonely hearth, the murmurs of neighbors, the fragile balance between suspicion and survival. And in the silence of those empty rooms, we may hear something that history has too often left unsaid. The quiet strength of women who endured. The Widow's Awakening. The first awareness of the day is not of light, but of cold. It is a deep, seeping chill that has crept in from the damp earthen floor through the thin straw of your mattress and settled into your bones. You surface slowly from a shallow, dream-troubled sleep, your body already aching with a familiar weariness. You open your eyes to the deep gray gloom of your small, one-room cottage. The world outside is still wrapped in the silence of the pre-dawn, but it is the silence inside that is the most profound. You reach out a hand, a gesture born of long habit, to the space beside you on the low wooden bed platform. Your fingers find only the cold, empty straw. The space has been empty for 3 winters now, but still, in these first, disoriented moments of waking, your body forgets. Your heart remembers. The cottage is a universe of silence. The only sound is the soft, rhythmic whisper of your own breath, a small, lonely cloud of white mist in the frigid air. You listen for the other sounds that once filled this space. The deep, steady breathing of your husband, the rustle of his turning in his sleep. But there is nothing. The silence is not just an absence of noise, it is a presence, a weight, a constant, quiet companion that has taken his place in your bed and in your home. You rise, your joints protesting the cold. The rough, homespun linen of your shift is coarse against your skin. The air in the cottage smells of cold ash, of damp earth, and of the faint, lingering scent of the herbs you have hung from the rafters to dry. The hearth, the heart of the home, is a pit of gray, lifeless ash in the center of the room. The last of its warmth died hours ago. In a house with a husband and children, the fire might be banked at night, its embers carefully preserved to be coaxed back to life in the morning. But you are alone, and the effort of keeping the fire alive all night is a waste of precious fuel. And so, every morning begins with this same cold, dead hearth. You move through the familiar darkness, your bare feet cold on the hard-packed earth. You do not need a light. You know the geography of this small space by heart, the precise location of the wooden stool, the feel of the rough wattle and daub wall, the cold, smooth curve of the water pot in the corner. You kneel at the hearth and begin the first essential task of the day, the resurrection of the fire. Your hands, chapped and stiff with cold, fumble with the flint and steel. You strike them together again and again. The sharp, metallic click, a small, defiant sound in the stillness. A spark flies, then another. Finally, a spark catches in the small nest of dried moss and linen lint you have prepared. You blow on it gently, your breath a soft, focused prayer. The spark glows, it wavers, and then, with a tiny, hopeful flicker, a small flame is born. You feed the new flame with the smallest, driest twigs, nurturing it, protecting it, watching as it grows in strength. As the fire takes hold and the first real warmth begins to radiate into the room, a small knot of tension in your chest begins to unwind. You have survived another night. You have brought the light and the warmth back into your empty home. You are a widow. In the rigid patriarchal world of the medieval village, this is a dangerous and ambiguous state of being. You are no longer a wife, under the protection and the authority of a husband. You are not a maiden, under the care of a father. You are a woman alone, a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of the community. Your awakening is not just the start of a new day of labor, it is the daily recommitment to a life of solitary and often precarious survival. The cold of the empty space beside you is a constant reminder of what you have lost, but the warmth of the fire you have built with your own two hands is a testament to the quiet, stubborn strength that you have found. The spinster's morning. The day begins in a world of profound and unbroken silence. You awaken not to a sound, but to a subtle shift in the quality of the light, as the deep, inky blackness of the night begins to soften into a pre-dawn gray. Your cottage, a small one-room dwelling at the very edge of the village, is an island of stillness. There are no husband's heavy leather shoes by the door waiting to be filled. There are no children's voices clamoring for a crust of bread, no small bodies to be dressed and sent out for the day's chores. There is only the sound of your own quiet breathing and the distant, almost subliminal echo of the church bells, a sound that marks the passage of a time that seems for you to be standing still. You are a spinster, an unmarried woman. In a world where a woman's primary purpose and her entire social and economic identity are defined by her role as a wife and a mother, you are an anomaly. You are a woman who has, for one reason or another, a lack of a sufficient dowry, a scarcity of eligible men after a war or a plague, or perhaps even a quiet, unstated personal choice, remained outside the great central institution of society. And so, your mourning is a ritual of solitude, a quiet performance of a life lived on its own terms. You rise from your narrow straw bed. The air in the cottage is cold, but the silence is what is most palpable. It is a silence that is filled with the ghosts of what might have been. As you light your small fire, you do not have to think about another person's hunger. As you fetch your water, you do not have to think about another person's thirst. Your movements are economical, your tasks are for yourself alone. This solitude is a double-edged sword. It is a form of freedom, a fragile and often unacknowledged one. You are the master of your own small household. You are not subject to the will, the moods, the demands of a husband. You can organize your day, your work, your life, according to your own rhythms. This is a degree of autonomy that is almost unheard of for a woman in your world. But the freedom is also a profound and heavy burden. You have no one to rely on but yourself. There is no man to perform the heavy labor that your small holding requires, the mending of the fence, the chopping of the firewood, the plowing of your small strip of land if you are fortunate enough to have one. You must do it all yourself, or you must barter your own skills, your spinning, your weaving, your knowledge of herbs with your neighbors for their help. Every day is a constant and often wearying negotiation for survival. And the silence of your morning is also a deep and abiding loneliness. There is no one to share a quiet word with over the morning's meager meal. There is no one to share the small anxieties and the small triumphs of the day. The four walls of your cottage can feel, at times, like a sanctuary, and at other times, like a prison cell. As you prepare to face the day, you are acutely aware of your own otherness. You are a woman without a man, a tree without a vine, a solitary figure in a world that is built for pairs. Your spinster's morning, with its quiet, its freedom, and its profound, aching loneliness, is a daily immersion in the strange, ambiguous, and often difficult reality of your own singular existence. Fetching water alone. The morning is still young, the air cool and damp, and the village is stirring to life. It is time for one of the day's most essential and most public chores, the fetching of the water. For the married women of the village, this is a social event, a time to gather at the central well, to exchange news, to gossip, to laugh, to complain, to reaffirm the bonds of their shared domestic world. For you, a woman who lives alone, it is an ordeal. It is a slow, solitary walk into the very heart of the community's gaze, and you are acutely aware of the stares and the whispers that follow your every step. You take your 2 wooden buckets, their weight familiar in your hands, and you begin the walk from your small cottage at the edge of the village to the well in the center of the green. The path is muddy, and you watch your step. Your head bowed, your gaze fixed on the ground in front of you. You do not want to meet the eyes of the other villagers. As you approach the well, you can hear the sound of the other women's voices, a cheerful, clucking chatter that seems to fall silent for a brief, almost imperceptible moment as you come into view. They are gathered around the stone well head, their buckets lined up, their talk a flowing river of the village's business. They are discussing the price of eggs at the last market, the sickness of a neighbor's child, the latest sermon from the priest. It is a world from which you are excluded. You take your place at the end of the line, a little apart from the others. You do not join in their conversation. You wait in a state of quiet, self-contained stillness. But you can feel their eyes on you. You know what they are thinking, what they are whispering to each other behind their hands. They are wondering how you manage. How do you, a woman alone, afford the rent on your cottage? How do you have enough food to eat? The small coins you earn from your spinning or from selling your herbs at the market are a source of constant and suspicious speculation. Every penny in your hand is counted twice in their minds. They are judging you. Your clothes are neat and mended, but they are worn. Your face is clean, but it is lined with the worry of a life lived without the protection of a man. They see your solitude not as a misfortune, but as a kind of moral failing, a sign that you are somehow strange or difficult, or perhaps even cursed. And in the darkest corners of their minds, there is a flicker of fear. A woman who lives alone, who is not subject to the authority of a father or a husband, who possesses her own independent knowledge, especially a knowledge of the healing and the potentially harmful properties of the wild herbs, is a woman who is dangerously close to the archetype of the witch. You feel the weight of their collective gaze, a physical pressure. You keep your own face impassive, a blank mask that betrays none of the anxiety or the resentment that you feel. When it is your turn, you work the heavy, creaking mechanism of the well, lowering your bucket into the dark, cool depths and hauling it back up, heavy and sloshing with water. You fill your 2 buckets, the work of familiar and welcome distraction from the social discomfort. And then you begin the long, slow walk back to your cottage, your shoulders straining under the weight of the yoke that holds the 2 buckets. You do not look back. You can feel the women's eyes on your retreating form. You can almost hear the moment that their hushed whispers will blossom back into their normal, easy chatter. The moment that the brief, uncomfortable interruption of your presence is over. You have completed your task. You have the water you need to survive. But you have also paid the daily price of your solitude, the quiet and deeply chilling currency of their suspicion. The empty table. The main meal of the day is eaten at midday when the sun is at its highest point in the sky. It is the brief, welcome pause in the long, hard rhythm of the day's labor. For most of the families in the village, it is a time of a noisy, crowded, and often chaotic togetherness. The husband and the older sons come in from the fields, their bodies tired and hungry. The small children clamor for their food. The woman of the house presides over the distribution of the meal, her voice a constant stream of commands and of admonishments. But for you, in your small, quiet cottage, the midday meal is a very different kind of ritual. It is a meal for one, eaten at an empty table, in a silence that is filled only by the sound of your own eating and the soft, crackling voice of the fire. You come in from your own work, from your garden, from your spinning wheel, from the woods where you have been gathering firewood. You are hungry, and the food you have prepared is the same simple and unchanging food that is eaten in every other cottage in the village. It is a bowl of pottage, the thick, perpetual stew of grains and vegetables that is the bedrock of the peasant diet. It has been simmering all morning in the single, soot-blackened iron pot that hangs over your hearth. You ladle a portion of the thick, gray-brown stew into a rough wooden bowl. You take a thick shive of the dark, heavy rye bread that you baked 2 days ago, and you sit down at your small, rough-hewn wooden table. The table is bare, save for your bowl, your spoon, and your cup of weak ale. There is no one sitting across from you. There is no one to share a word with. The meal begins. You eat slowly, your movements deliberate. There is no reason to hurry. The silence of the room seems to amplify the small, intimate sounds of the meal. You can hear the soft scraping of your wooden spoon against the inside of the bowl. You can hear the sound of your own chewing, the small, wet sounds of your own body sustaining itself. You tear a piece of the hard bread and you dip it into the pottage, the bread a rough, edible sponge for the warm, savory liquid. The food is sustenance, it is fuel. But a shared meal is more than that. It is a ritual of community, of family, of connection. To eat alone is to be reminded, in a most profound and visceral way, of your own solitude. As you eat, your mind is free to wander. You think of the work that still needs to be done in the afternoon. You worry about the coming winter and whether your small store of preserved vegetables will be enough to last. And sometimes you think of the past. You think of the other meals that were eaten at this table. You can almost hear the echo of your husband's voice, telling a story from his day in the fields. You can almost see the faces of your parents, long gone, who sat at this same table when you were a child. The empty space across from you is not just empty. It is filled with the ghosts of all the meals that are no longer shared. When the bowl is empty, you wipe it clean with the last of your bread. The meal is over. The brief pause in the day is done.
There is no lingering, no conversation. There is only the simple, solitary, and slightly sad ritual of feeding yourself. You rise from the empty table and you return to your work. The silence of your cottage, a constant and quiet reminder of a life that is lived entirely and often painfully alone.
Gossip at the market. Market day is the one day of the week when the entire scattered world of your rural community comes together. It is the heart of the local economy, the center of its social life, and the great, humming, and often cruel engine of its gossip. For you, a woman who lives alone, a trip to the market is a necessary but deeply fraught experience. It is a journey into a world where every transaction is also a social judgment, and where the glances of your neighbors are as sharp and as freely traded as their goods. You arrive at the bustling market square, your small basket on your arm containing the few things you have to sell or to barter. A half-dozen eggs from your one scrawny chicken, a small, neatly wound ball of the fine woolen thread you have spent the week spinning, a bundle of the dried herbs you have gathered from the woods. This is your currency, the small, hard-won product of your solitary labor. You find a small, unobtrusive space at the edge of the market, lay out your goods on a clean piece of cloth, and you wait. The market is a river of noise and of smells, and you are a small, quiet stone in its current. You watch the other women, the wives of the farmers and the artisans. They move through the market in small, chattering groups. They laugh, they haggle loudly, they exchange the news of the week. Their presence is a loud, confident, and communal one. Your presence is a quiet, isolated, and self-contained one.
When a potential customer approaches your small stall, the negotiation is a delicate and often difficult one. Without a husband to speak for you, to lend the weight of a man's authority to the transaction, you are in a weak position. You must be both firm and polite, a difficult balance to strike. A man might try to bully you into a lower price, assuming you are a weak and easy target. A woman might look at your goods with a critical, suspicious eye. You know that you are the subject of their constant low-level speculation. They watch to see what you buy. If you buy a small piece of meat, a rare luxury, they will whisper to each other, "Where did she get the coin for that?" They will wonder if you have a secret hoard of money left by your deceased husband, or if you have come by it through some other, more mysterious and more sinister means. If you buy nothing but a little salt, they will whisper that you are on the edge of starvation, that you are too proud or too strange to ask for help.
Every interaction is scrutinized. If the priest stops to speak with you, it is noted. If the Lord's reeve gives you a sharp look, it is noted. You are a puzzle, an anomaly, and the community is constantly trying to piece together the story of your life to fit you into a narrative that they can understand. And so, you sit through the long hours of the market day, your face a calm, neutral mask. You sell your eggs for a few precious coins. You trade your thread for a small bag of flour. You endure the stares, the whispers, the unspoken judgments. The market is a necessary part of your survival. It is the only way for you to turn your labor into the things you need to live. But it is also a weekly immersion in the cold and often cruel waters of public opinion, a stark reminder that in the small, insular world of the medieval village, to be alone is to be perpetually and suspiciously on display.
The church's judgment. On Sunday, the entire village gathers for Mass. It is the one time in the week when the whole community comes together in a single sacred space. For you, a woman who lives alone, it is an occasion of complex and often conflicting emotions. The church is a source of profound spiritual comfort, a connection to the divine, a promise of a better life in the world to come. But it is also a place of deep and often painful social judgment,
a place where the teachings of the church and the prejudices of the community can feel like they are aimed squarely and uncomfortably at you. You walk to the small stone parish church, your head covered with a clean linen wimple. You enter through the heavy iron-studded oak door, and you are enveloped in the cool, dim, and sacred atmosphere of the place. The air smells of old stone, of beeswax, of the faint, lingering scent of incense. The light is a soft, colored glow, filtering through the small stained glass window behind the altar, the one gift that a wealthy, long-dead lord gave to the village. The space is filled with the low murmur of your neighbors' voices as they find their places.
You do not sit with the other families. You find your customary place at the very back of the church, in the shadows, near the cold stone wall. This is the unofficial section for the outsiders, for the widows, the spinsters, the very poor. Your solitary presence is a stark and visible fact in a room that is organized in its seating and in its very essence around the unit of the family. The priest, a stern and often distant figure in his embroidered vestments, begins the Mass. His voice, chanting the familiar, mysterious, and incomprehensible Latin, echoes in the high timbered rafters. The rituals of the service are a deep and abiding comfort. The ringing of the small sanctus bell, the elevation of the host, the shared communal act of kneeling and of praying. These are the ancient, unchanging rhythms that give your life a sense of a larger, divine meaning. But then comes the sermon. The priest turns to the congregation and he begins to speak in the vernacular, in the rough, familiar language of your own tongue. And his words are often a source of a deep and deeply personal discomfort. The sermons of the medieval church are filled with warnings against the temptations of the flesh, against the sins of pride, of lust, of idleness. And the figure of the woman is often held up as the primary source of these temptations, a weak vessel, a daughter of Eve, who can lead a man into sin.
And for a woman who lives alone, who is not under the direct, daily control of a husband, these warnings can feel particularly pointed. When the priest speaks of the dangers of gossip, of idleness, of a woman who has too much time on her hands, you can feel the eyes of your neighbors flickering towards you. When he speaks of the temptations of the devil, who preys upon the lonely and the isolated, you know that the other villagers are thinking of you, the solitary woman in the cottage at the edge of the woods. The church, which should be a place of universal sanctuary, can also be a place that reinforces your otherness, that gives a theological weight to the suspicions of your neighbors. You are a woman without a man to guide you, to control you. And in the eyes of the church, and of the community that it shapes, this makes you a figure of a potential and a dangerous moral disorder. You leave the church after the service, blinking in the bright, unforgiving light of the day. You have found your moment of spiritual solace in the rituals of the Mass, but you have also been reminded, in the most public and the most authoritative of settings, of your own precarious and deeply suspect place in the divine and the social order of your world.
Between respect and fear. Your position in the village is a strange and precarious balancing act. You are an object of constant and often contradictory perceptions. In the eyes of your neighbors, you are not a single, stable entity. You are a shifting, ambiguous figure, seen one moment with a grudging respect, and the next with a dark and primal fear. Your life is a long, slow walk on a tightrope stretched between these two opposing poles of the community's imagination. The respect you command is an earned respect,
a grudging acknowledgement of your undeniable competence and your resilience. You are a woman who manages to survive, and to do so with a quiet dignity, in a world that is designed to be navigated by men. Your neighbors see that your small cottage is well maintained, that your gardening is neat and productive, that your spinning is of a fine and consistent quality. They see that you are hardworking, that you are resourceful, and that you are, in the most fundamental sense of the word, a survivor.
This earns you a certain kind of practical respect. A neighbor whose child has a high fever might, in desperation, come to your door in the middle of the night to ask for your help, for your knowledge of the healing herbs that grow in the woods. A young woman, about to be married, might come to you to buy the fine woolen thread she needs for her dowry chest. In these moments, you are seen as a valuable and productive member of the community, a woman whose skills are a necessary part of the village's complex, interdependent economy. But this respect is a fragile and a conditional thing, and it is always shadowed by a deeper, older, and more powerful emotion: fear. The very things that earn you respect are also the sources of this fear. Your independence is seen as unnatural. Your solitude is seen as suspicious. Your knowledge, particularly your knowledge of the natural world, is seen as a form of a secret and potentially dangerous power. In a world where the lines between folk medicine and magic are thin and blurred, your ability to heal with herbs is a double-edged sword. If the sick child you tend to gets better, you are a miracle worker. But if the child dies, as so often happens, the whispers can begin. Did you use the wrong herb? Or was your intention not a pure one? Did your poultice carry a blessing or a curse?
Your solitude itself is a source of fear. The other villagers live their lives in the noisy, crowded, and public world of the family. They cannot imagine what you do in the long, silent hours that you spend alone. Their ignorance is a fertile ground for the imagination. They imagine you talking to unseen spirits. They imagine you concocting strange and powerful potions. They imagine you engaged in a secret, nocturnal life that is outside the bounds of their own familiar and Christian world. And so you are caught in this strange duality. You are both the hard-working, respectable widow and the strange, reclusive woman at the edge of the village. You are both the skilled healer and the potential witch. You learn to navigate this complex and treacherous social landscape with a constant, watchful, and careful grace. You are always polite, you are always helpful, but you are never too familiar. You keep a certain protective distance, for you know that the respect of your neighbors is a thin and brittle sheet of ice, and that the dark, cold, and dangerous waters of their fear are always and forever swirling just beneath it. Children's eyes. Children are the unfiltered soul of a village. They are the mirrors that reflect the unspoken beliefs, the hidden anxieties, and the deep-seated prejudices of their parents. And for you, the woman who lives alone, the eyes of the village children are a constant and often painful reminder of your own strange and slightly terrifying place in their world. You are a character in their folklore, a figure in the landscape of their games and their dares. Your small cottage, standing a little apart from the others at the edge of the woods, is a place of a mysterious and a thrilling terror. The children of the village dare each other to run up and touch your door or to peek through a crack in your shutters, and then to run away shrieking with a mixture of real and of performative fear.
When you walk through the village, a silence often falls over a group of playing children. They stop their game and they watch you pass, their eyes wide with a kind of fascinated awe. They are not being malicious, not usually. They are simply reacting to you as they have been taught to react to the unknown, to the other. You are the village witch from their fairy tales, made real. You are the strange old woman who lives alone in the woods.
Sometimes their curiosity gets the better of them. A small, brave child might approach you, their eyes wide, and ask you a simple, direct, and devastatingly innocent question. Is it true you can talk to the birds? Why don't you have a husband? These are the questions that their parents are whispering to each other, now given a pure and unfiltered voice. But the children are not just a source of this reflected fear. They are also, sometimes, a source of a surprising and a disarming human connection. A child who has fallen and scraped the knee might, in their pain and their confusion, forget their fear and come to you for help, knowing that you are the one who has the soothing salves and the gentle hands. In these moments, the walls of suspicion seem to fall away, and you are no longer the strange, solitary woman, but simply an adult, offering comfort to a child in need.
And you watch them, in turn, with a complex mixture of emotions. You watch them play their boisterous, joyful games, and you feel a deep and a poignant sense of your own childless solitude. You see the easy, unthinking affection between a mother and her child, and you feel a pang of a grief for a life that you have not lived. You are a part of their world, but you are not of it. You are a landmark in their mental map of the village, a source of a delicious and a half-believed terror, a figure of a strange and a compelling mystery. The eyes of the children, in their innocence and in their unwitting cruelty, are a constant and a powerful reminder that in the small, tight, and deeply conformist world of the medieval village, to be different is to be, in some fundamental and inescapable way, alone.
Gathering wood. The fire on your hearth is not a luxury. It is the absolute, non-negotiable center of your survival. It is your only source of warmth in the long, cold winter, your only means of cooking your food, your only light in the deep, oppressive darkness of the night. But the fire is a hungry and a demanding god, and a significant portion of your life, especially in the autumn months, is consumed by the constant, arduous, and often lonely task of gathering the fuel to feed it. You are a woman alone, and you do not have a husband or a son to perform the heavy labor of felling trees and of splitting logs. You must rely on your own strength and on the ancient rights that are granted to the poor of the village. You have the right of estover, the right to gather wood from the Lord's woodlands. But this is a highly restricted right. You are not allowed to cut down a living tree. You are not allowed to use an axe. You are allowed to take only what you can gather by hook or by crook. The dead branches that you can pull down from the trees with a long, hooked pole, and the fallen wood that you can find on the forest floor. Your day of gathering begins in the cool, damp air of the early morning. You take your hooked pole and a length of rope, and you walk from your cottage to the woods that lie at the edge of the village's territory. The woods are a place of a deep and often intimidating silence. The light is a dim, green, and watery thing, filtering through the high, dense canopy of the trees. The only sounds are the rustle of your own footsteps in the thick layer of damp, decaying leaves, the distant call of a crow, the snap of a twig underfoot. The work is slow, painstaking, and physically demanding.
You walk with your eyes scanning the high branches, looking for the telltale sign of a dead limb, one that is gray, leafless, and brittle. When you find one, you must hook it with your long pole and then pull, using all of your body weight until the branch cracks and falls to the ground. You then break it into manageable lengths with your hands or by stamping on it with your feet.
You also search the forest floor, kicking through the leaves, looking for the fallen branches that have been brought down by the wind. Every piece of dry, solid wood is a small, precious treasure. You gather what you can, and you bind it together into a large, heavy bundle with your rope. And then comes the hardest part of all, the journey home. You hoist the massive bundle of wood onto your back. The weight is immense, the rough branches digging into your shoulders. You begin the long, slow, and agonizing walk back to your cottage, your back bent, your muscles straining, your breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest is a place of both a great natural beauty and of a constant low-level fear. You are alone, and you are vulnerable. You know that the woods can be a haven for outlaws, for desperate, lawless men. You know that there are wolves in the deeper parts of the forest. Every strange sound, every flicker of movement in the shadows sends a jolt of anxiety through you. You finally arrive back at your cottage, exhausted, your body aching, your hands scratched and filled with splinters. You unceremoniously drop the bundle of wood by your door. It is a pitifully small pile for a full day's work, a pile that will be consumed by your hungry hearth in just a few short, cold days. And you know that tomorrow, and the day after that, and for all the days until you have gathered enough to see you through the winter, you must return to the woods and begin the long, lonely, and arduous task all over again.
Herbs and healing. In a world without doctors, without pharmacies, without any scientific understanding of disease, the art of healing is a green art, a quiet, traditional wisdom that is rooted in the deep, practical knowledge of the natural world. And you, the woman who lives alone, are often the keeper of this knowledge. Your garden, the hedgerows, and the nearby woods are your medicine chest, and the herbs that grow there are your allies in the constant and often desperate battle against sickness and against pain. Your knowledge has not been learned from books. It has been passed down to you from your mother, and from her mother before that, a long, unbroken, and oral chain of female wisdom. You know the secret names of the plants. You know their properties. You know the auspicious times to gather them according to the phases of the moon. Your small cottage is filled with the pungent, aromatic smells of your trade. Bunches of herbs hang from the rafters, drying in the smoky air, the feathery leaves of yarrow, the silver-gray stalks of sage, the bright yellow flowers of St. John's wort. On a low shelf are a collection of earthenware pots containing the salves, the poultices, and the infusions that you have prepared.
This is a quiet and a powerful knowledge. You know that the leaves of the comfrey plant, which you call knitbone, can be mashed into a poultice to help heal a broken bone. You know that a tea made from the flowers of the chamomile plant can soothe a troubled stomach or help a fretful child to sleep. You know that the leaves of the stinging nettle, when boiled, can make a nourishing and iron-rich soup that can help to purify the blood. You know that a salve made from marigold petals can soothe a burn and prevent a wound from festering. Your neighbors, in their times of need, will often overcome their suspicion of you and will come to your door for help. A mother will come with a child who is burning with a fever, and you will give her a tea made from willow bark or from meadowsweet. A man who has cut himself badly with a scythe will come to you to have the wound cleaned and dressed with a poultice of yarrow, which is known for its ability to staunch the flow of blood. You are the village's unofficial healer, its midwife, its pharmacist. You are a figure of immense practical importance. But your power is a deeply ambiguous one. The line between healing and harming, between a white magic and a black magic, is a thin and a dangerous one in the minds of your neighbors. The same knowledge that allows you to create a healing tea could, they whisper, also allow you to create a poisonous one. The same charm that you mutter over a poultice to enhance its power could be a prayer, or it could be a curse. And so you practice your art with a quiet, careful, and often secret discretion. You do not boast of your knowledge. You do not charge a fixed fee for your services, but you accept a gift in return, a loaf of bread, a handful of eggs. You are aware always of the precariousness of your position. Your knowledge is a source of respect, but it is also a source of fear. And you know that in a time of plague, or of a sudden unexplained sickness in the village's cattle, this fear can easily curdle into a dangerous and a deadly accusation. Your healing herbs are your greatest source of power, but they are also your greatest source of peril.
Bartering alone. In the cash-poor economy of the medieval village, the most common form of commerce is not the exchange of coin, but the direct and often complex art of the barter. A good harvest is not just a source of food, it is a source of wealth, a surplus that can be traded for the other necessities of life. For you, a woman who lives alone, the act of bartering is a fundamental and a constant part of your survival, and it is a negotiation that is always, in some subtle way, tilted against you. Your wealth is not measured in acres of land or in herds of livestock. It is measured in the small, painstakingly produced products of your own solitary labor. It is the fine, strong woolen thread that you have spent a week spinning. It is the half-dozen eggs that your single chicken has laid. It is the small, precious surplus of leeks or of beans from your cottage garden. It is the bundle of medicinal herbs that you have gathered and dried. This is the capital that you must use to acquire the things that you cannot produce yourself.
You need a new pot from the potter. You need a small bag of salt from the traveling merchant. You need the blacksmith to mend the broken blade of your small hand sickle. You need the miller to grind your small sack of grain, and you must pay him his fee. For all of these things, you must barter. The negotiation is a delicate and often a difficult one. You approach the blacksmith, a large, powerful, and often gruff man. You show him your broken tool. He names his price, a certain number of eggs. You know that the price he has named is higher than the price he would name for one of the village men. He sees you, a woman alone, and he assumes that you are both ignorant of the proper value of things and that you are desperate. You must stand your ground. You must haggle. You must argue. You must persuade. You must do so with a voice that is firm but not aggressive, with a manner that is respectful but not submissive. It is a difficult and a draining performance. You do not have a husband to stand beside you, to lend the weight of his male presence to the negotiation. You are on your own.
You are also at a disadvantage because your own products, your thread, your herbs, are often seen as women's work and are therefore considered to be of a lesser value than the men's work of the blacksmith or the potter. You must work twice as hard to produce the goods that will be considered an equal trade for theirs. And every transaction is a public one, subject to the scrutiny and the gossip of the village. If you manage to strike a good bargain, there will be whispers that you must have used some kind of feminine wile or even a charm to get the better of the man. If you are forced to accept a poor bargain, it is seen as proof of your weakness, of your inability to survive without a man to protect your interests. And so, you learn to be a shrewd and a patient negotiator. You learn the true value of your own labor. You learn to walk away from a bad deal. The small, daily acts of bartering are more than just an economic necessity. They are a constant and a necessary assertion of your own independent worth. Every successful bargain, every handful of eggs traded for a needed service, is a small, quiet, and deeply satisfying victory in the long and often uphill battle for your own solitary survival.
The cottage garden. In the small, circumscribed world of your solitary life, there is one patch of ground that is entirely and unequivocally your own. It is the small, rectangular plot of land that lies behind your cottage, your toft. It is not a place of beauty, of flowers, of leisure. It is a place of intense, practical, and life-sustaining labor. It is your cottage garden, and it is your single greatest shield against the ever-present threat of hunger. The garden is not a large space, but every square inch of it is used. It is a messy, chaotic, and incredibly productive ecosystem, a testament to your deep, practical, and hard-won knowledge of the earth. You have no ox to pull a plow. All the work of the garden is done with your own two hands, with a simple, heavy, and iron-tipped digging stick or a spade. In the spring, you spend your days turning the heavy, damp soil, your back aching, your hands raw and blistered. You enrich the soil with the compost from your own small midden heap, the ash from your hearth, the vegetable scraps from your meals, the droppings from your chicken, the contents of your own chamber pot. In your world, nothing is wasted.
The garden is planted not in the neat, orderly rows of a modern vegetable patch, but in a dense, multi-layered, and seemingly chaotic jumble of plants. You practice a form of companion planting that your mother taught you. You know that the tall, sturdy corn stalks will provide a natural trellis for the climbing bean vines. You know that the broad, sprawling leaves of the squash plants will help to shade the soil, to conserve its moisture, and to suppress the weeds. This is the ancient indigenous American triad of the Three Sisters, a system of sustainable agriculture that is perfectly adapted to a small, low-tech garden. You grow the staples that will form the basis of your winter diet. You grow leeks, you grow onions, you grow cabbages that can be salted down and preserved as a kind of sauerkraut. You grow the root vegetables that will be stored in your small root cellar, the turnips, the parsnips, the carrots. And you grow the peas and the beans that will be left on the vine to dry, their hard, protein-rich seeds a vital source of nourishment in the lean months.
The garden is a place of constant work. You must be in it every day, weeding, watering, chasing away the birds and the rabbits that see your small plot as their own personal larder. You learn to read the signs of the plants, to know when a leaf is yellowing from a lack of water, or when a plant is being attacked by an insect. But the garden is more than just a source of food. It is a source of a profound and a deep psychological comfort. It is a place where you are the master. It is a small, orderly world that you have created and that you control. A welcome contrast to the larger world outside your fence, a world where you are so often powerless. To work in the garden is to be engaged in a quiet and often deeply satisfying conversation with the earth. It is a place of solitude, but it is not a place of loneliness. You are surrounded by the quiet, patient, and living presence of your plants. As you kneel on the ground, your hands in the warm, dark soil, you feel a deep and a powerful connection to the great cyclical rhythms of life, of growth, and of renewal. Your small, humble garden is your refuge, your larder, and your greatest and most reliable ally, the accusation. The life of a woman alone is a life lived on a knife's edge, a life of a constant, careful, and often exhausting performance of harmlessness. You know that the respect of your neighbors is a fragile and a conditional thing, and that it can be shattered in an instant by a single unlucky event, a single festering suspicion, a single whispered and deadly word. And one hot and airless summer afternoon, that moment arrives. It begins with the death of a cow. Your nearest neighbor, a man named Thomas, a man who has always looked at you with a certain sullen suspicion, has lost his most valuable possession. His only milk cow, which seemed healthy yesterday, is now lying dead in his small muddy yard. He does not know the cause. It could be a sickness. It could be a poisonous weed it has eaten. It could be a dozen different natural things. But in a world that is steeped in a belief in the power of the supernatural, of magic, of the evil eye, his mind does not turn to a natural explanation. It turns to a supernatural one. It turns to you.
The whispers begin almost immediately. They start in the small, tight circle of Thomas's own family, and they spread through the village like a contagion, from the well to the market to the alehouse. The logic is a simple, a powerful, and a deeply terrifying one. A bad thing has happened. A cause must be found. And who is the most likely cause of such a strange and unnatural event? The strange and unnatural woman who lives at the edge of the village. The woman who lives alone. The woman who is known to have a secret knowledge of the herbs that grow in the woods. You hear the whispers indirectly at first. You notice that the other women at the well turn their backs on you more pointedly than usual. You see a group of men outside the alehouse fall silent and stare at you as you pass. The atmosphere of the village, which has always been a mixture of a grudging acceptance and a low-level suspicion, has now curdled into something much colder and much more menacing. Then the accusation becomes more direct. Thomas, his face dark with a mixture of grief and of anger, confronts you in the village street. He does not accuse you directly of witchcraft. The word is too dangerous to be spoken aloud. But his meaning is clear. "My cow is dead," he says, his voice a low, accusatory growl. "She was a good cow. There was no sickness in her, and she was grazing in the field that borders your own cursed little garden."
Your heart turns to a cold, heavy stone in your chest. You know that to protest your innocence is useless. It will only be seen as a sign of your guilt. You know that to show fear is to confirm his suspicion. You must remain calm. You must be the silent woman, the woman who is in control of her own emotions. You look him in the eye, your own face a mask of a quiet and a dignified sorrow. "I am sorry for your loss, Thomas," you say, your voice steady. "It is a great misfortune." You turn and you walk away, your back straight, your pace unhurried. But you can feel his eyes and the eyes of the other villagers who have gathered to watch burning into your back. The accusation has been made. The finger has been pointed. And you know that from this moment on, you are no longer just the strange, solitary woman of the village. You are a marked woman. You are a woman who is living under the deep, dark, and potentially lethal shadow of their fear.
Nights of unease. The accusation has changed everything. The world, which was already a place of a quiet, low-level anxiety, has now become a place of a sharp and a constant fear. The days are a trial of a forced public composure, but it is the nights that are the worst. The night, which was once a time of a quiet, if lonely peace, has now become a long, dark, and terrifying vigil. You bar the heavy wooden door of your cottage. You shutter your window, just as you have always done. But these simple physical barriers no longer feel like they are enough. The fear is not just of the dangers that might be outside, it is of the danger that has been planted, like a poisonous seed, in the minds of the people who live just a few hundred feet away from you. You lie on your straw bed, but you do not sleep. You listen. You listen with an intensity that is a physical ache. Every sound of the night, every creak of the old timber-framed cottage, every rustle of the thatch in the wind is now magnified and filtered through the lens of your fear. You hear a sound outside, a footstep, the snap of a twig. You hold your breath. Your heart pounds in your chest, a frantic, trapped bird. Is it just an animal, a fox, or a badger moving through the darkness? Or is it someone from the village, lurking outside your cottage, their mind filled with a dark and a malicious intent? You lie motionless, straining to hear, until the silence returns, a silence that is now filled with your own imagined terrors. The wind groans in the eaves, a low, mournful sound. Is it just the wind? Or is it the sound of a disembodied voice, a spirit, a demon? The superstitions that you have always half believed now take on a new and a terrifying reality. In the eyes of the villagers, you are a woman who is in league with these dark forces, and in the lonely, fearful darkness of your own night, you begin to almost believe it yourself.
You are tormented by nightmares. You dream of being chased, of being cornered. You dream of the faces of your neighbors, their expressions twisted with hatred. You dream of fire. You wake up with a gasp, your body slick with a cold sweat, the dream so vivid that it takes you a long, terrifying moment to separate it from reality. The loneliness, which was once a dull, familiar ache, has now become a sharp and a terrifying vulnerability. You have no one to share your fear with. You have no husband to lie beside you, his presence a warm and a reassuring bulwark against the terrors of the night. You are utterly and completely alone with your fear. And so, you wait. You wait for the first faint gray light of the dawn, the light that will signal the end of the long and the torturous night. You watch the small dying embers of your hearth fire, their faint red glow, a small and a fragile companion in the darkness. The nights of unease are a slow and a psychological form of torture, a constant and a wearying immersion in a world where every shadow holds a threat, and where the greatest danger of all is the fear that is growing in your own and your neighbors' hearts.
The whisper of witchcraft. The word itself is a thing of a terrible and a venomous power. It is a word that is rarely, if ever, spoken to your face. It is a word that is reserved for the hushed and the fearful conversations that take place by the village well, for the drunken and the malicious gossip of the alehouse, for the dark and the superstitious imaginings of the night. But you do not need to hear the word to know that it is being said. You can feel it. You can see it in the eyes of your neighbors. You can hear it in the sudden and the profound hush that falls over a group of people when you approach. The word is witch, and the whisper of it is now your constant and your invisible companion. The accusation that you have bewitched your neighbor's cow has not led to a formal legal charge. Not yet. But it has created a new and a deeply poisonous social reality for you. You are now seen not just as a strange or an unfortunate woman, you are seen as a source of a malevolent and a supernatural power. The small and the ordinary misfortunes of village life are now all laid at your door. A sudden and a violent hailstorm that damages the crops is not seen as an act of nature. It is your doing.
A child that falls ill with a sudden and a mysterious fever is not a victim of a common sickness. It is a victim of your evil eye. A batch of ale that turns sour is not the result of a bad fermentation. It is the result of a curse that you have placed upon the barrel. You have become the focal point for all of the village's fear, for all of its anxiety, for all of its anger at a world that is so often harsh and unpredictable and cruel.
Your every action is now reinterpreted through this dark and this superstitious lens. The healing herbs that you gather are no longer seen as medicine. They are seen as the ingredients for your malevolent potions. Your quiet and your solitary nature is no longer seen as a sign of your shyness. It is seen as proof of your secretive and your nocturnal dealings with the devil. Even your piety is called into question. You continue to go to church, to kneel, to pray, but you can feel the other worshippers shrinking away from you. They whisper that your prayers are a blasphemous mockery, that you are simply a wolf in sheep's clothing, a servant of Satan who has dared to enter the house of God.
The priest himself, who once treated you with a kind, if a distant respect, is now wary. His sermons on the ever-present danger of the devil, on the wiles of the witches who are his earthly agents, now seem to have a new and a personal edge to them. He is both a man of God and a man of his community, and he is not immune to the rising tide of fear and of suspicion. This life, under the constant whisper of witchcraft, is a life of a profound and a terrifying isolation. You are an outcast, a pariah, a source of a spiritual contamination. The small and the simple human connections that make life bearable are now denied to you. No one will share a cup of ale with you. No one will greet you on the path. You walk through your own village as if you are a ghost, a feared and a despised specter that the living wish would simply disappear. The whisper is a poison that has seeped into the very soul of your world, and it is a poison for which there is no known antidote.
Fires of judgment. The whispers about you in your own village are a source of a deep and a personal terror, but they are part of a much larger and a more terrifying story, a story that is unfolding across the whole of Christendom. The fear of witchcraft is a fever that is sweeping through the land, and the stories of what is happening in other distant places, stories that are carried by traveling merchants and by wandering pilgrims, are a source of a constant and a deeply chilling dread. These are the stories of the fires of judgment. You hear of the great witch trials that are taking place in Germany, in France, in Switzerland. You hear of the professional witch finders, the inquisitors who travel from town to town. Their arrival is signal for a wave of panic, of accusations, of torture, and of death. You hear of the methods they use to prove that a woman is a witch. You hear of the swimming test, where the accused is bound hand and foot and thrown into a river or a pond. If she sinks and drowns, she is declared innocent. If she floats, she is declared guilty, as the pure and the holy water has rejected her. You hear of the search for the devil's mark, a spot on the body that is said to be insensitive to pain. The accused woman is stripped naked, and her body is shaved and then pricked all over with a long, sharp needle. If a spot is found where she does not cry out, it is taken as irrefutable proof of her guilt.
You hear of the confessions, the long and the detailed, stories of the witch's Sabbath, of the pacts with the devil, of the acts of a black magic. You know in your heart that these stories cannot be true.
but you also know how they are obtained. You hear the whispers of the torture chambers, of the rack, of the thumbscrews, of the sleep deprivation, of the slow and the systematic breaking of the human will until the accused is willing to confess to anything, to name anyone, just to make the agony stop. And you hear of the final act in this terrible drama, the execution. You hear of the women, and sometimes the men, being led to the public square. You hear of the great pile of wood, the stake, the chains. You hear of the priest holding up a cross. You hear of the torch, and of the screams, and of the smell of the burning flesh.
These stories, which drift into your small and your quiet village, are like a dark and a poisonous fairy tale. They are both distant and terrifyingly immediate. You look at your own neighbors, at the people you have known your entire life. You see the fear and the superstition that is in their eyes. And you know that the line between a whispered suspicion and a formal accusation, between a local grudge and a witch hunt, is a thin and a fragile one. The fires of judgment that are burning in the distant towns are a stark and a brutal warning. They are a testament to what can happen when a society is gripped by a collective fear, when it needs a scapegoat to blame for its misfortunes. And you, the solitary woman, the woman who is already an object of suspicion, you know that you are the most vulnerable and the most likely to be offered up as a sacrifice to the flames. You wonder, in the long and the fearful hours of the night, if solitude itself has become a crime whose only and ultimate punishment is fire.
A candle in the night. The night in your small and now deeply hostile world is a long and an arduous journey through a sea of fear and of loneliness. The darkness outside your shuttered window feels like a physical and a menacing presence. The silence inside your cottage is a heavy and an oppressive blanket. In these long and these silent hours, the weight of your solitude, of your otherness, of the danger you are in, can feel almost too heavy to bear. You sit on a low stool by the hearth, where the fire has been banked for the night, its embers a faint and a pulsating red glow in the darkness. The only other light comes from a single and a sputtering tallow candle, its small and its wavering flame casting long and dancing shadows on the rough and the uneven walls of your home. The candle is a precious thing, a luxury you can ill afford, but tonight the need for its small and its friendly light is greater than the need to conserve the wax. The loneliness is a physical ache, a hollowness in your chest. You are a social being, born to live in a community, and you have been cast out. You are surrounded by your neighbors, yet you are as isolated as if you were on a desert island. The silence in the cottage is a constant and a painful reminder of the human connections that you have lost, of the shared and the easy companionship that is now denied to you.
The fear is a cold and a constant companion. It is the fear of the unexplained noise outside. It is the fear of the accusing stare of a neighbor in the morning. It is the fear of the single and the catastrophic event, the failed harvest, the sudden plague, that could tip the village's fragile mood from a passive suspicion into an active and a violent persecution. In this deep and this dark valley of the soul, it would be easy to surrender to despair, to let the darkness, both outside and within, consume you. But as you sit there, watching the small and the steady flame of the candle, you find within yourself a different and a quieter and a more powerful emotion. It is a fierce and a stubborn and an almost defiant kind of endurance. You have survived this far. You have survived the death of your husband. You have survived the loneliness. You have survived the back-breaking labor of a life lived on your own. You have fed yourself, you have clothed yourself, you have sheltered yourself. You have done this through your own strength, through your own skill, through your own unwavering will to live.
This realization is not a source of a pride, but of a quiet and a deep strength. You are not a witch. You are not a monster. You are a woman who has endured. And in that endurance, you find a kind of a fierce and a solitary grace. The candle burns low, its flame beginning to gutter in the pool of its own melted wax. The night is not over. The fear has not gone away. But as you sit there in the deepening darkness, you are not just a victim. You are a survivor. And you know, with a quiet and a profound certainty, that you will find the strength to face the coming dawn and whatever it may bring. The small and the guttering flame of the candle is a mirror of your own small and stubborn and utterly indomitable soul.
The unexpected ally. The days that follow the public accusation are a slow and a steady descent into an almost complete social isolation. The whispers have become a wall of silence. The suspicious glances have become a collective shunning. The village has, in its fear and in its ignorance, drawn a circle around you, a circle that you cannot cross and that no one else will. And in this cold and this lonely landscape, the smallest and the most unexpected act of human kindness can feel like a miracle, a small and a warm and a life-sustaining fire in the midst of a vast and a frozen wasteland. It happens one morning, just after dawn. You open the heavy wooden door of your cottage to face another day of a hard and a solitary labor, and there on your doorstep is a small and a simple offering. It is a loaf of bread. It is a manchet loaf, the fine and the white bread that is usually reserved for the priest or for the Lord's table, not the coarse and the dark rye bread that is the staple of the village. It is still warm from the oven, and the smell of it is a powerful and a deeply comforting and an almost forgotten scent of simple and human decency. There is no one there. The village is still quiet. Whoever left it has done so in the secret and the pre-dawn hours, an act of a stealthy and a courageous kindness. You look around and you see no one, but you know, with a deep and a sudden certainty, who has left it. It is the baker's wife, a woman named Elspeth, a woman whose own young daughter you had once tended to through a long and a dangerous fever. This small and this silent act of charity is a profound and a revolutionary event. It is a single and a dissenting voice in the chorus of a condemnation. It is a declaration that not everyone in the village has succumbed to the fear, to the suspicion, to the madness. It is a sign that the old and the human bonds of neighborliness, of a gratitude, of a simple and a compassionate decency have not been entirely broken.
You take the loaf of bread inside your cottage. You hold it in your hands, its warmth seeping into your cold fingers. And you begin to weep. You weep not from a sorrow, but from a profound and an overwhelming sense of a relief. The tears are a release of the tension, of the fear, of the crushing loneliness that you have been carrying for so long. You are not entirely alone. There is at least one other person in this village who does not see you as a witch, but as a human being. There is at least one other person who remembers your past acts of a kindness, and who is now, in your own dark hour, repaying that kindness, even at the risk of bringing the village's suspicion upon herself. The loaf of bread is more than just a food. It is a message. It is a symbol of a hope. It is the proof that even in the darkest and the most fearful of times, the small and the quiet and the often invisible threads of a human connection can endure. You break off a piece of the warm and the white bread, and you eat it, and it is the most delicious and the most life-affirming thing you have ever tasted.
The weight of property. In the rigidly hierarchical and the patriarchal world of the medieval village, the ownership of a land is the foundation of all wealth, of all status, and of all power. And land is almost exclusively the property of men. A woman, in most cases, cannot inherit a land in her own right. But there is one significant exception to this rule. It is the widow's dower. And for you, a widow, this small and this legally protected right to a property is the single most important and most complex factor in your solitary survival. According to the custom of the manor, a widow is entitled to a portion of her deceased husband's land, usually 1/3, which she has the right to hold and to farm for the rest of her life. This is not an act of charity. It is a legal right, a recognition that she has contributed to the value of the land through her own domestic labor. This small piece of property is your lifeline. It is your security. It is the one tangible thing that stands between you and destitution.
The land gives you a degree of an independence that is almost unheard of for a woman in your world. The produce from your small strip of land in the village's open fields and from the garden plot behind your cottage is what feeds you. Any small surplus that you can produce is what you can take to the market to barter for the other necessities of life. The ownership of this property means that you are not entirely dependent on the charity of your neighbors or of the parish. You are a landholder, a recognized and a tax-paying member of the manorial economy. But this independence is a heavy and a double-edged sword. You do not have a husband or a son to perform the heavy and the physical labor that the land requires. You must plow, you must plant, you must harvest your own small strip of land yourself, or you must use your meager resources to hire the help of one of the village men. You are a land owner, but you are also a farm laborer, a dual role that is a source of a constant and an exhausting physical strain.
And your ownership of the land is also a source of a deep and a simmering resentment among your neighbors. Land is the scarcest and the most valuable of all resources, and in their eyes, the land that you hold is land that is being wasted on a woman, land that could be more productively farmed by a man, by a family with many hungry mouths to feed. Your small and your legally protected piece of property makes you an object of a bitter and a silent envy. Thomas, the neighbor whose cow has died, looks at your small and your well-tended field, and he sees a land that he believes should, by rights, be his. This economic resentment is the dry and the flammable tinder that can be so easily ignited into an accusation of witchcraft by the spark of a single and an unfortunate event. And so you cling to your land with a fierce and a desperate tenacity. You work it. You defend it in the manorial court if you have to. You pay your taxes on it. It is both the source of your survival and the source of your neighbor's envy. It is a fragile and a precarious balance of power. The small and the muddy plot of earth that you call your own is the weight that both anchors you to the world and makes you a target within it.
The solitary road. The world of a medieval woman is, for the most part, a small and a circumscribed one. Her life is lived within the familiar and the knowable boundaries of her own village, of her own parish. The world beyond this small and this local horizon is a place of a rumor, of a legend, and of a danger, a world that is primarily traveled and navigated by men. But for you, a woman who lives alone, there are times when a journey is not a choice, but a necessity. And to travel the roads of your world
as a solitary woman is to undertake a journey that is filled with a unique and a heightened sense of both a fear and of a strange and a fragile kind of a freedom. The reason for your journey might be a practical one. You might need to travel to a larger and a more distant market town to sell your fine and your woolen thread, where you can get a better price for it. You might be a skilled and a herbal healer, and your reputation has spread to a neighboring village where a wealthy and a sick person has sent for you. Or your journey might be a spiritual one. You might be a pilgrim, walking to a distant shrine to pray for the soul of your dead husband, or to seek a healing for your own weary heart.
You prepare for your journey with a meticulous and an anxious care. Your clothes are simple and drab, and designed to attract as little attention as possible. You carry your few precious coins hidden deep within the folds of your tunic. You carry a small bag with a crust of a bread, a piece of a cheese, and a flask of an ale. And you carry a long and a sturdy staff, a tool for walking on the rough and the muddy roads, but also your only and your meager form of a defense. To be a woman alone on the road is to be a profoundly and a dangerously vulnerable figure. The roads are not safe. They are the domain of the bandit, of the outlaw, of the desperate and the lawless men. You are seen as an easy and a tempting target, a woman without the protection of a father, of a husband, of a brother. And so you travel with a constant and a heightened sense of an awareness. Your eyes are always scanning the road ahead, the dark and the menacing line of the woods that run alongside it. Your ears are attuned to every sound, to the snap of a twig, to the sound of an approaching footstep. You walk with a sense of a purpose. You do not linger. You do not make an eye contact with the strangers you pass.
You seek a shelter at night in the places that offer a degree of a safety. In a monastery, which will have a guest house for a pilgrim, or in a respectable and a family-run inn. You sleep in a crowded and a communal room, your small and your precious bag of belongings clutched tightly in your arms. But the journey is not just a story of a fear. It is also, in a strange and an unexpected way, a story of a freedom. On the road, you are, for a brief and a precious time, free from the suffocating and the judgmental gaze of your own village. You are an anonymous figure. No one knows your story. No one is whispering about you. You are simply a traveler, one of many on the great and the open road. And you see the wider world. You see the great and the bustling cities. You see the towering cathedrals. You see the different landscapes, the different customs of the different regions. Your own small world is expanded. The solitary road, for all its perils, is also a path of a discovery, of a self-reliance, and of a fragile and a fleeting and an intensely lived kind of a freedom.
Memory of the dead. The seasons turn. The snows of another winter melt into the mud of another spring. The fields are planted, the crops are harvested. The rhythm of the village life goes on, as it always has. But for you, a widow, the past is not a foreign country. It is a constant and a quiet and an intimate companion. The memory of your husband, of the life that you once shared, is a powerful and an enduring presence in your solitary world. The most tangible and the most public reminder of your loss is the small and the sacred patch of ground that is the village churchyard. Here, among the leaning and the moss-covered stones that mark the resting places of the generations of the village's dead, is the simple and the unmarked mound of earth that is your husband's grave. You come here often,
In the quiet and the late afternoon when the day's work is done, you are not the only one. The churchyard is a place of a quiet and a female ritual. You will see other widows, other mothers who have lost a child, tending to the graves of their own lost loved ones. You kneel on the damp and the cool earth. You pull the weeds that have grown up around the grave. In the spring, you plant a small and a wild flower, a primrose or a violet, a small and a living tribute to a life that is gone. And as you work, you speak. You speak to the silence, to the earth, as if he can still hear you. Your voice is a low and a soft murmur. You tell him the news of the village. You tell him of your struggles, of your small and your quiet triumphs. You ask for his guidance, for his strength. This is not a sign of a madness. It is a profound and a deeply human need to maintain a connection, to keep the conversation of your marriage alive, even after one of the partners has departed. The memory of him is also woven into the very fabric of your home. You sit on the stool that he carved with his own rough hands. You eat with the spoon that he made for you. You sleep under the roof that he thatched. Every object in your small and your humble cottage is saturated with the memory of his presence. Sometimes this is a source of a deep and a poignant comfort. At other times, it is a source of a sharp and an almost unbearable grief.
You are the keeper of his memory. In a world where most people leave behind no written record, no portrait, no grand and stone monument, the memory of a person's life is a fragile and an oral thing. It is your sacred duty to remember him, to tell the stories of his life, to keep his name and his spirit alive in the world. The memory of the dead is not a burden, it is an anchor. It connects you to the past, to the love, and to the life that you once had. It gives your own solitary life a sense of a context, of a meaning, of a continuity. You are not just a woman alone. You are a widow, a woman who has loved and who has lost, and who now carries the sacred and the quiet and the heavy and the beautiful weight of a memory in her heart.
The childless woman. In the world of the medieval village, a woman's worth and her very identity is inextricably linked to her fertility. To be a wife is to be a mother. To have children, especially sons, is to fulfill your most sacred and your most essential purpose. It is to ensure the continuation of your husband's family line. It is to provide the new hands that are needed to work the family's land. It is to create the heirs who will inherit your small and your precious piece of the world. And to be a childless woman, whether by a chance or by a choice or by a tragedy, is to be a tree without a fruit, a field without a crop, a profound and a quiet and an often deeply painful failure. If you are a spinster, a woman who has never married, your childlessness is an accepted, if a pitied, part of your condition. But if you are a widow who was married for many years and who never conceived, your barrenness is a source of a constant and a quiet shame. The fault in the eyes of the community and of the church is always seen as being yours. It is a sign of a physical or a spiritual failing. It is seen as a punishment from a god, a sign that you have, in some hidden way, displeased him.
You live in a world that is filled with the noise and the mess and the vibrant and the demanding life of children. You see them everywhere, playing in the muddy streets, helping their parents in the fields, crowding the pews in the church on a Sunday, and every sight of them is a small and a sharp and a poignant reminder of the emptiness of your own quiet cottage. You watch the other women of the village, and you see their lives, for all their hardships, filled with a purpose that you do not have. You see them comforting a crying toddler. You see them teaching a young daughter to spin. You see them beaming with a pride at the strength of a grown son. You are an observer of this great and this central drama of a human life, but you are not a participant. The loneliness of a woman alone is a profound thing, but the loneliness of a childless woman is a different and a deeper kind of a solitude. It is the loneliness of a future that is a blank page. You have no one to care for you in your old age. You have no one to inherit your small and your carefully tended possessions. You have no one to carry your name and the name of your husband into the future. When you die, your story and the story of your family will simply end.
You may try to fill this emptiness in other ways. You may become the village's unofficial aunt, the one who always has a small and a sweet treat for the neighborhood children. You may become a godmother, a formal and a spiritual role that allows you to have a special connection to another woman's child. Or you may pour all of your nurturing and your maternal instincts into your garden, into your animals, into the healing of the sick. But the ache is always there. It is the quiet and the constant and the unspoken grief for the children who were never born, for the lineage that will never be. It is the heaviest and the most silent of all the burdens that a solitary woman in your world must bear.
The quiet strength. Your life is not a story that will ever be told in the great chronicles of the kings or in the epic poems of the knights. Your name will not be recorded in any history book. You will leave behind no grand monument of a stone, no beautiful and illuminated manuscript. Your life is a small and a quiet and an almost invisible one. And yet, to live such a life, to endure it, to survive it, requires a kind of a strength that is as profound and as powerful as that of any armored warrior. It is a quiet and unacknowledged and a deeply female kind of a strength. It is the strength of a physical endurance. It is the strength to rise in the cold and the dark morning every single morning and to face a day of a hard and relentless physical labor. It is the strength to haul the heavy buckets of a water from the well, to carry the crushing load of firewood on your back, to spend your days bent over in your garden, your hands in the cold and the damp earth. It is the strength of a body that is often undernourished, that is often aching, but that continues day after day to perform the essential and the repetitive tasks of a survival.
It is the strength of a practical skill. It is the deep and the intricate knowledge of how to manage a household on your own. It is the skill of a spinning a fine and a strong thread, of a baking a nourishing loaf of a bread from a poor flour, of a preserving the small and the precious bounty of your summer garden to last through the long and the lean winter. It is the wisdom of a knowing which herbs can heal a fever and which can soothe a wound. It is the shrewdness of knowing how to strike a fair bargain in a market that is tilted against you. This is not a learned and a bookish knowledge. It is a hard-won and a practical wisdom, a library of a skill that is stored in your own two hands. And it is the strength of a profound and a psychological resilience. It is the strength to endure the loneliness, the crushing and the daily silence of an empty cottage. It is the strength to face the suspicion, the gossip, and the judgment of your neighbors with a calm and a dignified exterior. To keep your own private griefs and your own private fears locked away in your own silent heart.
It is the strength to live under the constant and the terrifying shadow of an accusation and to not be broken by the fear. This is a strength that is not celebrated. There are no songs sung about it. There are no rewards given for it. It is a quiet and an internal and an almost invisible kind of a courage. It is the simple and the stubborn and the unyielding refusal to surrender to the immense and the overwhelming pressures of your world. You endure, you survive, you carry on. You do so not for a glory or for a wealth or for a power. You do so simply because it is what must be done. Your life is a testament to a strength that is as quiet and as deep and as enduring as the ancient and the weathered stones of the village church. It is a strength that is unrecorded by a history, but it is the strength that is the true and the resilient and the unbreakable bedrock of your world.
Legends of the Outcast. Your life will end as it was lived, quietly and without a great ceremony. You will grow old, your body will weaken, and one day you will simply fail to rise from your straw bed. A neighbor, noticing that there is no smoke rising from your chimney, will come to check on you, and they will find you still and silent, your long and your solitary struggle finally over. You will be buried in the churchyard in an unmarked grave, and the village will move on, but your story will not entirely disappear. You will, in a strange and a transformed way, continue to live on in the memory and in the imagination of the community that so often shunned you. You will become a legend. The stories the villagers tell about you long after you are gone will be a strange and a contradictory mixture of a half-truth, of a fear, and of a grudging and a half-acknowledged respect. You will become a fixture in the local folklore, a character in the cautionary tales that the grandmothers tell to the children by the fireside. You will become the witch of the woods. The stories will grow more elaborate with each telling. They will say that you could curdle the milk with a single and a sour glance. They will say that you could fly on a broomstick on the darkest of nights. They will say that you kept a black cat that was your familiar, your spirit helper, a demon in disguise. Your small cottage at the edge of the village will become a haunted place, a place that the children will dare each other to approach, but will never get too close to. Your knowledge of a herbal medicine will be transformed into a knowledge of a black magic. You will become a convenient and a satisfying explanation for all the small and the unexplained misfortunes of the village. But alongside these dark and these fearful stories, another and a quieter kind of a legend will also be told. The women of the village will remember you in a different way. They will remember the time that you sat with a sick child through a long and a feverish night when no one else would. They will remember the fine and the strong thread that you spun, a thread that was stronger and more even than any other in the village. They will remember your quiet and your dignified composure in the face of their own petty cruelties. In their stories, you will become a symbol not of a malice, but of a strength. You will become a legend of a self-reliance, of an independence,
of a woman who managed to survive, and even, in her own quiet way, to thrive in a world that was designed to crush her. Your solitude will be reinterpreted not as a sign of your otherness, but as a sign of your immense and your almost supernatural inner resilience. And so you will have two and a parallel afterlives in the memory of the village. You will be both the feared and the supernatural witch, and the respected and the resilient wise woman. You will be a monster to frighten the children, and you will be a model to inspire a quiet and a grudging admiration in the women. These legends, these half-truths, and these half-fears are the only and the final testament to your long and your difficult life. They are a reflection of the profound and the unresolved ambiguity with which the world has always viewed you. You were a woman who did not fit, a woman who lived outside the rules, and even in death you remain a puzzle, a mystery, a powerful and an enduring and an unforgotten legend of the outcast.
Closing reflections. As our quiet and our nocturnal exploration of this forgotten corner of the past comes to its end, and as the world of the solitary and the medieval woman begins to dissolve into the soft and the encroaching landscape of your own dreams, let us pause for one final and quiet reflection. The story of these women who lived their lives alone in the midst of a world that was built for a community is more than just a tale of a hardship and of a suspicion. It is a profound and a deeply moving meditation on the nature of a silence and of a strength. Their lives were in so many ways defined by a silence. There was the literal and the physical silence of the empty cottage, the silence of a meal eaten alone, of a night spent without another's breathing to break the darkness. But there was also a deeper and a social silence. It was the silence of being an outcast, of being the object of a gossip, but never a part of the conversation. It was the silence of a woman whose voice was not heard in the councils of the village, whose opinion was not sought, whose story was not recorded. And yet, within this profound and this often oppressive silence, they found a different kind of a voice. It was the voice of a self-reliance, the voice of a skill, the voice of a resilience. Their strength was a quiet strength, a strength that was not performed on a battlefield or in a courtroom, but in the small and the repetitive and the essential tasks of a daily survival. It was the strength of the hands that could coax a fire from a cold ash, that could spin a fine thread, that could soothe a fevered child. It was the strength of a spirit that could endure the loneliness, that could face the fear, and that could carve out a small and a fragile and a dignified space for itself in a world that had so little room for it. The truth of the women who lived alone in medieval times lies somewhere in the vast and the unexplored territory between the whispers of their neighbors and the quiet and the unrecorded realities of their own inner lives. They were not the one-dimensional witches of the folklore, nor were they the romanticized heroines of a modern and a feminist imagining. They were simply women in all their complexity and their courage and their vulnerability. Their story is a quiet and a powerful reminder that the great and the official histories of the world are always incomplete. It is a reminder that the most profound and the most moving stories of a human endurance are often the ones that are lived in the quietest and the most forgotten of corners. And it is a testament to the simple and the enduring and the deeply hopeful truth
that even in the most hostile of soils, a single and a solitary and a quiet kind of a strength can find a way to take a root and to grow.
What does it really mean to speak of women who lived without a man in the medieval world? It begins with solitude, yes, the empty hearth, the quiet bed, the meals eaten in silence. But soon we saw that it was never just about silence. It was about how a village looked at her. At the well, at the market, in the church pew, her independence was always on display, always judged. She might be admired for her hard work, for the way she tilled her garden or gathered her firewood, but just as quickly, admiration turned to suspicion. A sick cow, a bad harvest, a child's fever, and suddenly her name hovered in whispers, her shutters eyed with unease. We followed her through daily work, carrying wood, tending herbs, bartering for eggs and thread, all simple, ordinary things, yet without a husband's voice beside hers, they became struggles against the current of mistrust. Even her healing knowledge, the plants she dried and steeped into teas, could be seen as dangerous, as though a cup of sage carried as much whisk as it did comfort.
And we felt the shadows that pressed close, nights broken by strange noises, the dread that footsteps outside her cottage might mean danger, tales of witchcraft murmured in the dark, stories of women accused, punished, even burned. To live alone was to live under the constant threat that solitude itself might be seen as a crime. Yet there was light, a candle burning steady in the night, a neighbor who left a loaf of bread at her door, reminding us that kindness survived even in suspicious times, a small plot of land that gave her both survival and a measure of power, though power always drew envy too. On the road, she walked carefully but freely, knowing every mile was both peril and proof that she endured. And finally, we lingered at the graves she tended, the silence she carried, the lineage that ended with her. Some would remember her only in fearful tales told by children. Others might recall her strength, her persistence, her quiet labor. Most, perhaps, would not remember her at all.
But that's why we've walked here tonight, to see what was overlooked, to hear the story beneath the gossip and the silence, to understand that these women, widows, spinsters, solitary souls, lived with resilience as much as loneliness, with endurance as much as fear. In the end, the truth is not simple. It rests in the tension between suspicion and respect, between danger and survival, between silence and strength. These women may not have written their own stories into parchment or prayer books, but they left their mark in quieter ways, in gardens, in herbs, in survival itself. And perhaps the greatest truth is this, that their solitude was not only a burden, but also a form of fragile, defiant freedom.